Hello again, learners. Welcome back to our JavaScript for Beginners series. In this episode, we are going to talk about AJAX and introduce the Fetch API for making HTTP requests. Let's get started. So, AJAX, which stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, allows web applications to send and retrieve the data from a server asynchronously without interfering with the display and behavior of the existing page. So it might seem confusing, but it's actually very simple, and all the web pages are doing it every time, like without you even noticing it. So, however, XML is no longer commonly used as the format for data exchange nowadays. Now we use usually JSON. So the Fetch API provides an interface for fetching resources across the network. It's more powerful and flexible than the HTML, XML HTTP request. So the XML HTTP request was usually used for AJAX traditionally. Now Fetch actually uses promises, making it actually better fit for the asynchronous programming. So in order to see that in action, we will create another file called index.html and then we'll create a document and we'll call AJAX. All right, and then we will set up h1 tag hello fetch. All right, let's see if it's working. Yeah, so it's working. So what we can do is in JavaScript itself, nowadays JavaScript comes by default with the fetch library. So what you have to do is just call the fetch function and then give here the URL. For now, what I will do is I will create a URL which actually goes to the live server of JSON placeholder that will return a certain JSON value no matter what your input is. So that's actually available for free out there. So for now, I will use this particular JSON URL and then I'm trying to fetch some post from it. So whenever you see a blog or YouTube itself, what happens is when you go to that YouTube page, the YouTube page is actually making some certain calls to the Google server saying that, okay, I need some of the latest videos. So same thing, I'm accessing for some of the posts from this particular website. So what I will do is I will give the URL over here, right? And then after that, inside that function, I'm going to say, so once that's done, I will ask that to be processed into the then keyword. So remember, then keyword will only work in case of promises has been returning. So if a promise is returned and it's resolved, then we can see the successful response of it. And then we will say, okay, that response needs to be parsed into JSON format. And then that value, we will access it as data. And then we will print it to the console.log. Console.log data. So what if the URL returns an error? I mean, reject the URL call itself, then we can use the catch block. So that's where catch block comes in, and then we will see, okay, what are the error that's happening over there, right? So if this works, then you can see the data from this particular URL as JSON format over here. As you can see, it's returning the 100 posts that's available from that particular URL. So remember, a fetch will return a promise that can be parsed into a then keyword, and then inside the then keyword you can see the contents of response, and then that response can be converted into JSON format, and then that JSON format can be used to whatever you want to do later on. And if it's being rejected, then you can catch it with the catch block. All right, so that's it. That's how a basic fetch call works. Now, so this is the get fetch call, right? So you're basically getting the data from the URL. So what if you want to post something to it? Post in the sense like you have to send some data, let's say as in a user ID or username and password. And then in the website, you have to authenticate it and then return that, okay, this particular user is actually authenticated. So that's the advanced step. For now, we will just see how we can send that particular kind of data. So in this example, we will see, okay, I want a particular data that has a user ID of 1, and then maybe the title as foo and then body as bar. Let's see if that's the case. All right. So we will create another object saying that, okay, let's post data equal to a JSON object. Inside the object, we will say user ID equal to 1, and then title as foo, and then body as bar. All right. So now we have the post data, data that needs to be sent over the URL. Again, same thing, we will call the URL. So here we will say URL, and then after, as the next parameter, as you can see in the VS Code auto input itself, you have given the URL, and then you can give whatever parameters that needs to be sent in the header. So we will say that, okay, the method that needs to be sent as is post, and then I will say headers. Inside the headers, I'm gonna say the content type needs to be the content type I'm sending is actually a JSON format. So JSON format is actually defined as this one, application/JSON, and then you will say body JSON dot stringify. So why we are doing that is, during the normal HTTP request, like, the internet only supports what basically is a string. So it cannot support any of the object or any array or anything like that. So it can only support a string version of whatever we are trying to send. So every application that's actually sending data to the internet, or like using the HTTP request, what they do is they stringify the particular data. So in this case, we are actually making this post data into a string format. So that's exactly what JSON.stringify does. We are saying that, okay, import the library JSON. That library actually comes by default in JavaScript, and then inside that library there is a function called stringify, which does is like it takes a JSON object and then converts that into a string format. All right. So we are sending the stringified version of that particular post data as the body content. Okay. Now, once you have that, once if the URL actually returns a resolve object, then you can use the same scenario as we used just now. So we will say if the response is there, and then we will do a response for JSON, then we will access that particular response for JSON part into a data object. Then we'll say console.log data. And if it's actually throwing an error, we will say catch error, and then we will console.log saying that, okay, this is an error, and then error, right? So basically what we are doing is we are making a post request to the same placeholder API, and we pass an options object to the fetch function, where we specify the method as post and set the headers to notify that, okay, this is in JSON format, and we give the body content in a JSON stringified object. Okay. Now if you save it and then check, as you can see, there is one with the user ID as 1, and then the title as foo, and then body as bar. So what this particular placeholder does is, if you give a particular user ID and then title and then body, it will look through the whole database as they have, and then check if any of the post is actually matching with this criteria. So this is coded in the backend. So once you send the data to the backend of this particular website, what it does is it check for this particular criteria to be matched, and if it's matched, then it will return the whole object itself. So it has an ID of 101. So now you can actually access this particular value using this particular ID. So this is how the AJAX works, and then like how can we use the fetch API to make the HTTP request. So currently we have tested get and post. There are other methods also like put, delete, and patch or update. And then we will see that those I don't think normally we use as often in the real world, but these are the main two things we use like frequently every time we use it, like out of the head. So it needs to be like imprinted in your brain if you are a JavaScript developer. So we will use other examples also in the upcoming episodes, and then in the next episode we will see like how does the JavaScript work in the browser, like what are the storage mechanisms they have, like for like example like cookies, local storage, session storage, like stuff like that. All right. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with the series. Happy coding and see you next time.